Okay, this is for all the men out there. We're going to talk about sex, and we've got famous and very good sexologist, Dr. Joseph Nines. Men, if you want to get more sex in your life, especially for guys like me and married, and you want more sex in your life, watch this show. Women, if your man is not being aggressive as you want him to be, share the show. And we're going to visit that in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Men, I think the last survey that I took and talking to a lot of guys, because I know a lot of guys, the one thing that they want more than money is sex. Now, and talking to a lot of guys who I know are married, they always express how, when you start the relationship, oh, it's sex anywhere, it's sex everywhere. Then the next thing you know, the sex drops off. In fact, one guy told me that it got to the point where he had to put it on the schedule to remind her. So we're going to dive into that. We want to talk about getting more sex. We're going to talk about sex. And with us is our guest, friend to the show. He is a very renowned and very good clinical sexologist, Dr. Joseph Nines. Welcome back to the show, Doctor.
Thank you, Vincent. It's great to be here.
Now, for those of you who think that this show is going to be a complete misogynistic show, you're right. And to bring it on, I've got some people to help me out. The two stars of the Three Wise Ones. He hails from Central New Jersey. He is the Imam of Iman. Oh, I'm sorry, Iman, unmute yourself. And my next, Iman, tell them the Islamic Center. Tell them about
the Islamic Center of Ewing, and I also represent the Islamic Council of Greater Trenton area as well.
Hailing from west of Philadelphia, as he unmutes himself now, he is getting very famous for being on the Three Wise Ones. And he's known from our last sex show of the man who said he can give his wife the best 6 seconds of her life. No, he is the rabbi, a new shoal of America, Rabbi Seth Frisch.
How are you? Shalom, everyone. Shalom, everyone.
Hi, Rabbi.
Vincent, I just want to say that I thought we weren't going to out me for that, but that's okay. I've come to expect that.
I'm sorry. Oh, there's the memo. Okay, yes. Well, okay, Dr. Nines, being a married man, and you're into it. It's all about everything, everywhere, anytime you think about it. It's sex on a regular basis. We've gotten so used to that. Why does it have to end?
Well, there's a particular kind of food that when people eat it, it greatly reduces their sex drive. It's called wedding cake.
Wedding cake. Oh, but do you and Rabbi go to the same joke store? I mean,
Well, one of the problems that I think exists in when relationships translate or transfer from a courting scenario into a marriage scenario, there's a lot more life that can get in the way. In other words, when people are courting, they're taking time and making time to set aside the importance of making the relationship work. And unfortunately, when marriage happens, a lot of times people sort of go back to this way of living that kind of takes the relationship for granted.
Well, Dr. Nines, I'm sorry to slice in, but I was listening about
by all means.
Cake. I was thinking wedding cake, slice in, feed the bride, feed the groom. But here's my real question, and I apologize for those metaphors, but the Imam and I, we both come from the religious communities, and our communities date back thousands of years. And when we look at this, we have certain standards, we have certain ideas. The list is endless about sexuality and roles within marriage. And I'm just wondering, what can either we bring to you or you bring to us so that we can have a meeting of community, standards that makes all of this important for our communities and for society as we live in it now. What can we bring?
Rabbi, let me be clear. You're not talking about having this massive orgy, are you?
God forbid. That is not part of our standards.
Let's clear that off.
No, I think that sometimes, though, in a more general view, I think sometimes, and maybe the doctor can address this. I think, quote, so-called religious people, I think sometimes they have hangups about sex. They're apprehensive about sex, about, as we would say, stepping out there and doing your thing or whatever. So I think that, we need to, I guess, tear down those barriers, if you will.
Well, Dr. Nines, let me ask you the question. We went through that huge period of American history called the Victorian era, where, sex was, quote unquote, only to keep your man strong or to procreate. Oh, no, I'm sorry. In Eastern civilization, women use sex to keep their man strong. But our westernized culture morphed into, going away from or moving away from the Roman culture of free love and sex to the Victorian era, where we were at such a level of gentleness. It wasn't even talked about and very rarely discussed. And they didn't have, I think they basically gave huge credence to the missionary position.
Well, I mean, the missionary position is historically coined from Christian missionaries going into foreign lands and teaching people that this is the way you're supposed to have sex, with the woman on her back and the man on top. And that was essentially a means of control or a means of power that was sort of adapted from what I would consider to be sort of like a maladjusted religious perspective. Because ideally, if you look at all the other creatures that exist on the planet, the way they engage in sex, you're talking about female. Yeah, the female is capable of getting away. There's no control. Controlled sex only happens between humans.
Oh, so that's
when we talk about like doggy style, right?
Thank you. I didn't want to say it, but thank you. Yes.
So when doggies do doggy style, the male mounts the female from behind, but the female is still free to run away.
Yeah, but if you're doing it right, she don't want to go nowhere.
Well, that's exactly right.
Well,
which is why the missionary position became sort of a means of actually controlling the woman.
Yeah.
well, let me just say that I can't speak for the imam, nor should I, but we come from traditions in which sexuality is, while it is defined, it is not controlling. And it is sacred within the scope of our marriage relationships. I certainly can say that within Judaism. And I can even go as far as to say that Judaism demands that the husband satisfy his wife. And even at the expense of putting off his gratification until his wife is ready for full satisfaction and full pleasure. And I don't know, Imam, if I think Islam shares that.
No, definitely, without a doubt, that there are many hadiths or traditions of sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that gives advice, or I should say, advice that the husband should really please the wife. That it shouldn't be, I'll use the modern day terminology, it should not be a wham bam thank you ma'am, unless of course she agrees to it. So emphasis is placed on making sure that the wife is satisfied.
Right.
But Iman, done right, a quickie can be a very beautiful thing.
Well, that's what he said. That's what
I said, unless of course, if it's something that it's agreed upon or whatever. And then let's face it, in today's society, I mean, that's something that takes place. Oftentimes both people are working, sometimes there's children around. So yeah, I mean, that can be a part of it. But in terms of satisfying your wife, if the number of quote quickies substantially outnumber the longies, then that's going to be a problem.
So I think we're all buying our jokes from the same store here. But
I come from the Christian tradition, which is sort of rooted in the Judaic tradition. Our grandfathers in faith is the way we sort of consider it. And specifically, I'm in the Catholic tradition, which I think often the Catholic tradition is sort of pointed at as, wow, you guys are the worst as it regards sex. But I think if you look at how the Catholic tradition speaks about sexuality, it's really very healthy. Like just like the other traditions, the imams and the rabbis, we put a priority on mutuality and satisfaction in the sexual act, and because it's important.
Dr. Hines, I would not have known that. I honestly, this is I've been around the block. I've obviously have many friends of a variety of traditions, religious, ethnicity. I don't think I've ever heard anyone, perhaps this is the purpose of this kind of exchange, talk about Catholic, practice, tradition in terms of the matrimonial bed, the family relations. I've never heard that the Catholic, perhaps not even the Christian traditions, puts that kind of emphasis on mutuality. And I mean, how else would the missionary position of control have come about if it hadn't been different than what you're describing?
Well, that's part of the problem. There's been an evolution over time, just like Vince was saying. In the Victorian age, there was a certain perspective on sexuality that sort of dictated how people thought about it. And from the Catholic tradition, I mean, there's really nothing that's ever changed in the last 2,000 years of Catholicism about what the theology is behind sexuality. But the teaching has never been very good. The church has never taught sexuality very well because they always take the approach of the appropriate way to have sex is to not do this.
Yeah.
As opposed to what is the appropriate way to have sex.
As opposed to the do's,
Exactly.
And I think a lot of men, and you can speak more to this, Doc, from a clinical standpoint or just a natural standpoint. And I hope I don't get myself in trouble here getting too
It's all right.
in
Dr.
detail.
Frank's not on the
Okay,
show.
but it you okay, but from a physiological standpoint, we all know that it takes women for the most part longer than men to reach the mountaintop. So with that thought, and I know people are different, but generally speaking, so with that thought in mind, it should propel the man to be more patient and to make sure that his partner, his wife, is satisfied and not just be thinking about himself. But unfortunately, I think that sometimes that doesn't happen with a lot of
And
guys.
this all begs, Imam, this all begs, the stratagem or the question even of where it is appropriate to do this. It is never appropriate in the Jewish tradition to have any of this outside the scope of marriage. It is just not appropriate. And I'll go as far as to say something that might put me a little bit out there, but in Judaism, we don't really have the concept of premarital sex for one very specific reason. If you have sex with someone who's not married and you're not married, you're married. That is a straightforward stratagem, number one. And number two, your sin is not in premarital sex. Your sin is not following that up with a contract, which is called a ketubah, which lays out very specifically the man's obligations to the woman, including what we're talking about.
So what you're saying, Rabbi, is sex seals the deal.
Exactly.
Well, it seals it enough.
Well, and it's very similar again in my Catholic Christian tradition. A marriage isn't valid until the couple has intercourse.
Right. And I'll add to that, Dr. Nines, intercourse is not appropriate in our tradition unless the woman receives satisfaction and pleasure. There's no obligation on the man. The obligation is on the woman to have that.
Hey, Rabbi, if that's the litmus test, a lot of men have failed miserably. Okay.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. I think that maybe it goes back to, and again, maybe I would say religious people. It could be, it could be Christian, Muslim, Judaism, or what have you. It's almost like taboo to talk about the kind of things that we're talking about now. But they are very, very important because sex is a very important aspect of the married life. And men need to understand women and women need to understand men so that they can develop a long-lasting relationship, one that's satisfying to both of them.
Well, there was a lot of DIY going on, do-it-yourself, in the last 50 years. And what Judaism, at least, has said for as long as that and before, is that these issues should be discussed, but they should not be discussed only with husband and wife. And it's usually fallen on, the rabbi to facilitate good language and good communication between husband and wife, which puts the rabbi in someone else's household. And that's okay. That's why people turn to us for exactly what we're talking about right now.
Well, Rabbi, DIY in the neighborhoods I grew up in were what's called porn. Okay, but we're going to dive into another block dealing with religion and sex with our guest, Dr. Joseph Nye, and my two co-hosts, the 2/3 of the three wise ones, Rabbi Seth Frisch and Imam Karib Bashir. And we're going to dive into that in just 2 minutes, 2 seconds. listen, now, in case a lot of you are new to the show, we are live also on Facebook. And anybody seeing this on either YouTube, Facebook, and even Roku, we're live on all of them right now. Scrolling across the little phone number, you can, if you're brave enough, get into the action and call in and talk to any of us well-renowned and informed gentlemen on how to get more sex. But Rabbi, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Because, oh, I'm sorry, not Rabbi, Dr. Nines. And then I'll come to you, Rabbi. In fact, Rabbi, you can even answer after the doctor. But Dr. Nines, because of some misunderstandings in religion and their aspect or ideology of sex, I found that a lot of men will tend to get things like mistress or prostitutes because they have their women in such a position, they have this desire for other things, and they go to other women for it.
Well, I think there was the guy who chaired my dissertation, Dr. William Staten, who's a way more world-renowned sexologist than me. He coined the phrase Madonna whore syndrome. And that was to sort of speak to this idea that there are a lot of men who sort of put their wife on a pedestal and are afraid to sort of approach them in any way with sexual communication about a desire that they might have, out of fear that their wife will be taken aback or feel as though she's being, treated in a way that she doesn't want to be treated, a disrespectful way.
I don't know. I think they're afraid to unleash the freak in her.
Well, what was the song, right? He said you want a woman in the street and a freak in the bed, right? And really, it's nothing wrong. See, it's nothing wrong. Well, as long as you don't go too far.
As long as she's in
you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, as long as she's in your bed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, Dr. Nines, I must be, the biggest opie in the world right now, because I don't even know what being a freak in bed really even means.
Oh, so, Rabbi, you got to hang around. Often.
I mean, I only know because, Vincent's told me about it. That's the only way I really know about it.
Oh, I would just point you to the Song of Solomon, my friend.
Right.
And that's.
Thank you. I do use that book as foreplay.
I don't really want to go there. Let me say that historically, when the sages were debating in what you call the Old Testament, we call it the Bible, the Tanakh, when they were debating the inclusion of the Song of Songs, or as you would say, the Song of Solomon, there were a significant array of rabbis, sages, that had advocated the Song of Songs not being included for that very reason. And it was a fellow a sage by the name of Akiva, Akiva, who advocated the inclusion specifically because he said it described the relationship of the Lord God to the people Israel. That was his conclusion, and thus it was included in our canon. And as a side product, it kind of got denuded of the sexuality that we've been talking about over the last 5-10 minutes, and really became of a theological level, which therefore begs the following point for us, at least, and that is, what is all this for? And many people regard it as for procreation. That all the things we're talking about, they regard it for procreation and only procreation. But in Judaism, it is not for procreation. It includes procreation,
right,
but not exclusively.
Yes, exactly. It includes, but it is not exclusively for that purpose.
And Rabbi, here's one thing that I've learned in theology school, was that the greatest political debate was actually about the Song of Solomon, and why it was, why they therefore deemed it wasn't because of the act of procreation. They politicalized that and said that sex should be for the act of procreation, or be fruitful and multiply. But a lot of theologians said that the real reason that they didn't want it in there was because he was writing about a Black woman.
Okay, interesting. Always interesting. I'm not sure if I could really comment on that.
Bathsheba was Black and beautiful, or as the old cliche go, Solomon saw her and said, hey, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice.
Well, Vince, I don't want to burst your bubble, and I know that bubble is very thin around you, so here it goes. My ancestors, they were not people of no color. My ancestors were people of varying colors. They lived just somewhere between Africa and Asia Minor or Asia. They were many colors, many streams of color. And so if you say that Bathsheba, as you would say, if you say that she was a woman of color, I'd have to say, what else could she be?
Well,
And that's in our tradition as well. Actually, I don't want to get into an entirely different subject, but many of the people that we read about in religious scripture were people of color. Some of them were actually Black, and some of them were associated with some of the prophets, and some of the women were actually married to some of the prophets.
That was the beauty. That was the beauty about Africa. But yeah, hold on, gentlemen. We've got a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead. Caller, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Hello? Is it me you're looking for?
Don't quit your day job, please.
I was going to say the same thing, please.
Well, that's because you and I are of the same mind.
Okay.
I was going to even add a little James Brown, and that is, don't moan so much, brother. Don't moan so much.
Okay, I thought we weren't going in that direction. I thought we were staying away from that.
All right. Well, Comedy Hour is going to end in exactly this second because we've got to pay some bills and take care of a little housekeeping. I'm Vincent Squire. We're going to talk about how to talk your spouse into or work your spouse into more sex with renowned sexologist, Dr. Joseph Nye, and my two co-hosts, Iman Karib Bashir and Rabbi Seth Frisch. And we'll be back. 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you gonna find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay. Caller, are you there? Hello? Okay, production. We lost our caller.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, there she is.
Hey, okay, caller.
Here I am.
We're talking about sex, caller. I got Dr. Joseph Nye and two-thirds of the three wise ones.
Well, now you have all three wise ones because
I
I
knew
just
it.
had to call
I
the
knew
break.
it.
I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yeah. By the way, since it's Dr. Lang who rang, I think we gotta all behave ourselves now.
How are we doing? How are we doing, Dr. Lang?
I think you're doing fine. I want to know from each of you that just how you feel about, okay, sex is physical for men. It's very emotional for women. So how do you how do you reconcile wanting to emotionally meet the needs of your spouse at the same time getting your physical needs met?
I'll let the doctor go first.
Well, it's good to hear from you again, Dr. Lang. I think in general, men are more physiologically turned on, while women are in general more emotionally turned on. But I would suggest like the reconciliation has to happen in the midst of that. So in other words, I think it's important for men to appeal to the physiological or the emotional needs of their spouse, and for the woman to appeal to the physiological needs of the spouse. There's a mutuality that happens in that. And that, above all, requires communication. Talking about what it is that turns you on, talking about what it is that you need to have from an emotional and even intellectual and physiological perspective to really enjoy one another sexually.
Okay, good answer.
Yeah, I would, if I may, I would say also too, and from a man's perspective, is taking up from what the doctor said, is that having the understanding that your wife is more emotional, generally speaking. So things such as embracing, things such as holding her after sex, the kissing, and speaking to her in such a way that will reach her inner being, showing those types of things as opposed to just going straight to it and it's over with. I think that those things do a lot in terms of reinforcing the caring and the love that women, quite frankly, they're searching for and they want and they need.
Mm.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I fall back on the teachings of Maimonides, who was revered both in the Jewish world and in the Islamic world as well. He was a great scholar, and he talked very clearly about men, husbands, kind of going over the fence, if you will, into what you and I would, Imam, what you and I would call emotion. That if a man was physiologically, as Dr. Nines was pointing out, if a man is physiologically turned on, and that is his only turn on, and that is his only goal and his only desire, then all that we have tried to create will break down. That won't get us to the sacred, because the act between a husband and wife is sacred. Yes. And so you have to bridge over, if you will, this world of just getting my physical needs met. And we've got to get into the world of where my husband and my wife and us, we actually now become co-partners with God. It's a sacred act. We become co-partners in children and in home and in family. And you can't get there just by grabbing, your spouse and having your way. It just won't work. And so we have to bridge over those things that Dr. Nines very appropriately described.
Well said.
I think also too, some of it I think it comes with time, where you really know your wife really knows you, and maybe in the early stages of your marriage, there might be a certain amount of embarrassment there. But as you begin to know each other and begin to be more comfortable with each other and discuss things, that embarrassment just it disappears.
Yeah.
So.
One thing, if I could, one of the things from my experience is coming to the realization that this is your partner, and she meets your needs as you meet hers. And as everybody, so I'm not going to eloquently put it, a strong, you cannot satisfy her emotionally by saying, honey, brace yourself. It's definitely, it takes a little time sometimes. You have to work it. You have to give a great deal of reassurance. I've talked to a great deal of women, and this is not me being misogynistic, but as all women, as strong as they may appear or want to project, as tough exterior as they like to have, a lot of them tend to have a level of insecurity in which you are blessed with being her husband and reassuring her. And once you do that, you break down those walls and you develop a stronger level of intimacy. And like the rabbis, I mean, like the imam said, sometimes it can be embarrassing to be that exposed, but being exposed to one another brings you both closer together, satisfying her emotionally. One of the biggest things in the Song of Solomon is where she gives him her biggest insecurity. She says, "I am very dark, but lovely." But he assures her, and he says that you are the fairest among the virgins and the daughters of Jerusalem, letting her know how beautiful she is and how beautiful she is to you. The most touching thing that I heard recently was when Martha Bush was on her deathbed and George Herbert Walker was there holding her hand, and she was drifting in and out. And she came to and she looked at him and she said, "God, George, you are so stunningly beautiful."
Hmm.
Remembering the beauty, the love that you had when it was new, the love of your youth, and always continuing to treat her as your queen of Sheba, your queen of your house, and the mother of you, besides being the mother of your children, reassures her emotionally that you need her, you love her, and you want her.
I think that's a great point, Vincent. And I also think, like, if you just think about the concept of what love is, love doesn't change. Love is constant, and it's so constant that it is eternal. And I think even in like the Song of Solomon or Song of Songs, that speaks to the level of intimacy that exists between what we all believe in different ways is this wondrous, loving creator God entering into our experience, bringing the human experience into the divine experience. And that's a beautiful, wonderful, eternal thing.
In fact, for most of us, it's a very spiritual act.
If I
But
could add to that.
can I just
Sorry.
jump in? I hear what you're saying about this whole, sacred moment, this whole, conception for all of that. But then there's sometimes you just want to hit it and quit it. Like I'm not going to listen to I'm coming up on the rough side of the mountain. I'm gonna be listening to Luther. So for me, you gotta have balance in your life all across the board, and in your sex life. If you're thinking about God and you're thinking about that, then sex is just not going to be fun. And if sex isn't good, then somebody's not doing it right. And I find from a spiritual perspective that when you sit in the seat of authority from a spiritual place, then sometimes even your spouse will have some reservation about, as Rabbi was saying, being a freak, because you hold within you the holiness of who God is for whatever faith tradition you come from. But then in that moment when you just want to just be with your spouse, you're not thinking about the Torah, you're not thinking about the Quran, you're not thinking about the Bible, you're thinking about, man, this is about to be good. So how do you reconcile that?
That's a beautiful point, and it's kind of interesting because when I think a lot of people, if they're thinking about the Bible or they're thinking about the Torah or they're thinking about anything religious, they're just going to go like this. That ain't going to work. So in a lot of cases, like the sacredness, I believe is it just speaks to the human energy, that love that exists between each other. And so when I'm working with couples who are struggling with how to negotiate their sex life, I'll often use the metaphor that, having a sexual relationship is kind of like eating. Sometimes you want to have a big 7-course dinner, and sometimes you just want to slip through McDonald's drive-through and have some fries.
Or at least a Big Mac.
Or a Big Mac. And the bottom line is you're being fed by that. You're being fed by that. But the nature of the nutrition is a little bit different.
Oh, you just got it, all right. You just got it, Iman.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Rabbi, man, you this.
Listen, I don't want to go non-halal and non-kosher here, but McDonald's does not fit that bill, you know.
Okay. Yeah, but I will say this too, because to our distinguished caller, is that at least in my faith, and I think it's across all faiths, is that to understand that marriage and marital relationships are sacred, and it's something that even in fulfilling that, we are actually fulfilling a worship. But at the same time, too, we don't go into the act with that thought on our mind. But I think in terms of understanding it in a comprehensive way, brings the husband and wife closer together, and hopefully will bring them to a spiritual level, not in the sense of if you're sitting in church or the synagogue or the mosque, but just a spiritual level that just takes you to a high position where you are so much into wanting to please one another and to be intimate with one another.
Right.
In a natural way.
Right.
Okay.
Dr. Lang, I hope this answers your question. And thanks for joining the He-Man Women Haters Club. Later on, we'll show you the secret high side.
It's my pleasure. Carry on, men. Carry on.
Thank
Be
you.
well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take
All
care.
right. Bye.
And on that note, we're going to come back with Dr. Joseph Nye and my two co-hosts. I'm kind of liking these two co-host things. I'm going to talk to my producer, Iman Bashir and Rabbi Seth Frisch.
Okay.
And we'll be back. 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Now, guys, talking.
You opened a small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay, we're back with Dr. Nines, and we're talking about sex. Oh, by the way, there's a number that's scrolling down. Feel free to call in, talk with us, and give us your questions or comments. And I also have my two co-hosts, Iman Bashir and Rabbi Seth Frisch. We are talking about more sex. Now, they say that power is definitely an aphrodisiac. Does a man's position of power make him more sexually attractive to women?
I think that's a great question. I would say, assuming the definition of power is defined as the ability to influence someone, I would say,
or the ability to have massive quantities of wealth.
Well, but that's a way to influence people, right?
Yeah.
You,
Yes.
you pay them off.
Mhm.
So the idea of power, I think, as the ability to influence is an essential part of, what happens in the dynamic between a couple as it regards their sexuality, because you certainly want to have an influence on one another in order to be able to express that love in a sexual way. But some people are more interested than others. And so you have to look at the dynamic of power to see whether or not you want to influence through a caring way or a more positive way of influencing, or a negative way of influencing, which
One
would be more
question is-
coercive.
One question is
look,
it an aphrodisiac or is it a turn on?
Exactly.
Well, it has to be something, because when I go to courtside in any NBA game, all I see are beautiful blonde-haired single women courtside, watching these millionaires run up and down the court.
Well, I think in that example, money is pretty influential.
Really?
You know something?
You
I think
seen
that
Matumbo's wife? You see how unattractive Matumbo is? You see how beautiful his wife? Come on.
you know something that I think to some degree, even though I'm probably going to get some pushback on this, because it doesn't apply to every single person. But realistically speaking, we can just look at things from a historical standpoint and in modern society. People who are in power and people who have money and influence, it is a turn on, and that women are attracted to that. Sometimes the attraction is natural, and then sometimes the attraction is artificial. And what I mean by artificial is that they're really attracted to the money and the power, not the person.
Yeah, that's true.
It exists. That's, I would even say, I don't know if this is, again, to quote the Imam here, I don't know if I won't get pushback on this, but I think it's part of evolution, and our ancestors, they would come, whoever came back to the cave with the bison or the venison, and naturally people would be attracted to him. He's the great hunter. He's the great provider. Why wouldn't evolutionarily that be an attraction? And we're living with the results of that today,
But I think that things that we see that, from an evolutionary standpoint, has become so embedded within the nature of people that even in the modern society where women are working, women are providing for themselves, they have their own businesses, I think some of that still exists. Because just like you said, you go out and you get a bear and whatever, bring it back. Women at one time were very, very dependent upon men. So I think some of that is still there. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we say, that doesn't exist in modern time. It does exist.
100% agree that it exists 100% still to this day.
So do I.
Very powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very powerful. Yeah.
I did read a survey where they talked to married women and asked them what do they think was sexy about their husbands. And one thing that stuck in my mind is that she said, I think he's sexy when he does the dishes.
Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you what people say all the time, and I hear people say all the time. So this is not just anecdotal. This is almost data. People say, oh, he's a good provider.
That's true.
I never hear that about a woman. They say, oh, she's a good provider. Is that a compliment?
Well, I'll tell you, my wife is a great provider.
Right.
And one of the interesting things when my wife and I had our son, she enjoyed her work and she was very successful at it. And we made the decision. I wasn't so happy in my work, so we made the decision that I would stay home and be the primary caretaker of my son. And she went back to work. And that was, back in the 80s when, men didn't do that. So my mother almost had a heart attack. But it really worked out well for us.
Well, Dr. Nines, this story is so unique that you're bringing it up as an example. It's almost solipsistic. You are bringing up an example that speaks to the reverse of what the Imam brought up.
Right. And that's I think essential for us to understand, because every relationship is unique. which is what makes it so sacred.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, when I mentioned that, I said that it's not every single circumstance,
Right.
Well, I think the imam just froze.
but I think we would have to be honest and say, generally speaking, that's what it is. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
And,
okay.
and Iman, I have to agree, because one of the most spoken, unspoken, depending on which community that you are in, is when they look at him, or when she introduces him to friends and family, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, "What does he do?"
Right.
Well, in my tradition too, there is a term, it's called Kawama, and it generally means to be a maintainer, provider, and the protector. That is something that in my faith tradition has been given to the man. And even in terms of marriage counseling, it is asked, well, what is it that you do? How can you provide? Even though the woman might be able to provide for herself, it is still uppermost in the minds of family that it is basically your responsibility to provide, to protect, and to maintain. And again, I think most women, even in this quote, modern society we're living in, they want that from a man. At the very least, to protect and to provide. If something takes place out in the street, they look to the man that, hey, come take care of this.
Well, Imam, I hear this all the time. Someone will say, oh, I met somebody. Or someone will say, oh, she has a boyfriend now, or a serious relationship. And the first thing that will come out of everyone's mouths is, does he have a job?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Well, let me tell you, one of the most DM'd person on social media right now is Melinda Gates.
Oh, yeah, right.
I was even tempted at one time. I had a whole but Melinda, you haven't returned my message. Call.
Yeah.
All right. So, Vince, I just want to say, there's a famous Katy Perry song, I think, where it's Call Me Maybe. So don't sit around waiting for that call. Just FYI. I know,
you might be getting a lot of gray hair. Can I mention?
Go ahead.
Can I say one thing? And maybe Dr. Nines can add to this. But I think that I think it's okay. I'll try to hurry up. I think it's very important for men to understand women and women to understand men, so that we can come closer together, even from the aspect of sex as it graduates. And what do I mean by that? If you're young, you're getting married, then there's usually a lot of sex or whatever. Then when the children come and you're really trying to establish yourself, it slows down. The man might still want it, but it kind of slows down a little bit. Then when you get a little older, women go through phases where now the sexual urge really returns. But you might be at that point where it's starting to slow down a little bit. And then, so it's all of those dynamics. So if we learn about it, I think it helps us and prepares us for it.
Agreed.
Well,
I couldn't agree.
That male slowing down period, I got one word for you: Viagra. Get some.
Right. Yes. Well, and listen, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that I'm slowing down. But anyway, I think you understand my point.
I agree with your point, but the most important thing I think that we have to remember is there are sort of generalities. It's in general,
Right.
men are different from women in general. However, it requires a level of intimacy and conversation and vulnerability for the couple to really learn to understand what the specifics are about, what matters to them, what they find attractive, what they find aphrodisiac, right? And I'm thinking now of the 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. It's a very popular book. It's based on a theory that there are 5 ways that people can sort of express or receive love, and they're different, and everybody's different, and that's why we have chocolate and vanilla, right? Because we all have tastes and interests and conditions, and the important thing is for us to be open enough to kind of talk about that stuff and not be afraid to talk about that stuff, which is why I enjoy this forum. We're just kind of putting it out there.
Right. Well, let's not forget that we all come from religious traditions that recognize the importance of this, and the idea of things that are inappropriate, I think we can all agree need to remain in the realm of the inappropriate, and that which is sacred needs to remain in the realm of the sacred, which is what we're talking about.
Okay, so
I
we
agree.
are out of time. So let's go into last words and we could close the show. Rabbi?
Well, I think I said it best just now, but I'll just say it again. There's nothing dirty about what we're talking about, and there's so many things beautiful and sacred about open communication, developing love over time, creating and raising a family, and enjoying the love and the support and the sexuality of our loved ones, our spouses specifically, and creating a wonderful home in which the presence of God is not in exile, but it is part of the marital bed, and it is part of our home and our home life. That's as good as it gets for us.
I'm gonna start treating you like Stevie Wonder. While you talk, I'm just had a credits rolling.
Okay.
Imam.
Yes, well,
Uh-oh.
I would like to echo what the rabbi said, because I think that it's important for us to understand that marriage is sacred. And I think that if we go into the relationship with that, in terms of our human consciousness, it establishes a foundation for the relationship to grow and to grow and to grow. And also, too, just to remember the 3 levels of interaction or human growth and development in a relationship. And that is the physical, but it doesn't stop there. There's also the mental and the spiritual. And when we can incorporate those 3 levels, it should bring about a happy and a tranquil relationship. And you're speaking to someone that's been married to the same woman, happily married for 43 years, maybe 44. I'm going to get in trouble for that, but 43 years. So yes.
Dr. Nines.
I agree with the rabbi and the imam. I would just add that there is something beautiful about sexual communication between 2 people, and it needs to be consensual, it needs to be caring, it needs to be open, and it needs to be loving. And the idea of a sexual relationship that doesn't have love in it, I feel bad for those folks engaging in that.
Well, on that note, and talking about sex and a lot more of it, I want to say that Memorial Day was my anniversary.
Hey, happy anniversary.
Congratulations.
Celebrated 3,800,047 minutes of being married to this one woman. And to me, every part of it she's always been the best part of my day. So the big thing that we talked about, and one thing that is in common, is if you want more sex out of your wife, spend more time with her. I'm Vincent Squire. On behalf of my guest, Dr. Joseph Nye, who's a good friend to the show. Look him up. He is really good. And my 2 co